Y'all, listen, and I took Uber this morning from the Tudor Arms Hotel here. And, I always ask my Uber drivers or my Lyft drivers, especially if they have a foreign accent, where they're from originally. Well, this guy was from a country near Russia that starts with a P, Packer, da-da-da-da-da-da. He grew up in a Muslim household. He speaks Persian, Farsi, so he told me which Farsi he speaks. And then he told me that his parents worked for the American Embassy for many, many, many years. So in 2019, they decided all to move to America. And so his parents moved to America with him. And here he is, he's driving an Uber. So I took a picture of him anyway. So I'm delighted to be here today. And it's been a long time. I know your rector, TJ Freeman. I was at the Seminary of the Southwest officing there when TJ came to go to seminary way back in 2010. So I was just thrilled when he was called to be your rector here. And I'm grateful for Pam. Pam, where are you? Pam, for originally getting in touch with me with an old friend of mine who is the rector at St. David's in Radnor, Pennsylvania for many years. He's the chairman on my board now. So when I get this text from Frank going, you need to talk to this woman named Pam. Well, so I was here back in 2018. I'm going to show you this in just a second. But what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to go through what I did with the group yesterday, but I'm going to really tighten it up and just kind of give you an overview of what this ministry is. But what I was going to tell you was, it has been a long time. I mean, I'm often asked to preach. I'm often asked to an adult forum. But it's been a long, long, long time, and I can't even remember that I'm asked to preach 3 sermons and do an adult forum. That's like, it's a challenge. So I'm so grateful, and I'm glad to be here. Real quick question of you all. How many of you are cradle or longtime Episcopalian, cradle Episcopalian? Yeah, and you're usually in the minority. So the rest of y'all came in from other traditions. So my story is, this is me sitting in my grandmother's garden in Brookhaven, Mississippi, where I was born. And I think that's why I continue to love Adirondack chairs. And we moved when I was about a year old. We moved over to Natchez, Mississippi. And as I said in my sermon this morning, we were Southern Baptists, and there were 5 children, and I was the middle child. And I went off to Mississippi State. After a couple of years, I got married someone who was a hospital administrator. If you heard my sermon, I talked about that. And we lived all around the South. We lived in New Orleans for 12 years. We wound up going to Beaumont in 1990, and David went as president of all 3 Baptist hospitals. So we came in very high profile to Beaumont. And so I immediately got involved with the ballet and the Symphony League and just, all of those things. And then only a couple of years later, we went through a divorce. So there I was, 40 years old with a 16-year-old son and an 8-year-old daughter, 9-year-old daughter, and I had not worked in a long time. Well, I wound up opening a business recruiting physicians. And my ex-husband became my first client, so the Baptist hospital, which is kind of humorous. So I was, we were Baptists, so we went through the Baptist hospital. I mean, he had become Baptist, right? And so I was sitting in my office in downtown Beaumont one day, and I remember it exactly. It was, it was in August of 1995, and I got this phone call from a woman, and she was on one of those boards with me, and she said, "Would you go to church with me? Would you go to church?" And I said, "Of course." "Sally, where do you go to church?" And she said, "I go to St. Mark's." So I went to church with Sally, and I was overwhelmed with the liturgy. What I did not tell Sally is that I had been going in that church, in the back door of that church, since my divorce in 1992. And because I was going to the rooms of Al-Anon, which is a group for people who have family members who have addictions. And I'd begun working the 12 steps of Al-Anon. And so when I did my 4th and 5th steps, when you do a fearless and moral inventory and you share that with someone, the woman I shared it with looked at me and she said, "Honey, you need a therapist." So I found a therapist who happened to be Episcopalian, who happened to be a member of St. Mark's. And she began giving me books to read that I had absolutely never heard of. C.S. Lewis. She had me read the Narnia Chronicles. Now, this is a therapist. Ayn Rand and Allen's Reaching Out. Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth. Hannah Hurnard's Hind's Feet on High Places. So this little Southern Baptist woman, my worldview began opening up in a big, huge way. I was journaling a lot. I would go and, I would go to Colorado and I'd hike and I journaled and I read another book called The Artist's Way. And so during that next year, I had a real sense that God was calling me to ministry. But what do you do with that when you're you're 40, you're in your early 40s, you're divorced, you're a woman, you're Southern Baptist, and you haven't finished your college education? Well, what you do with it is you just say yes, right? So that's what I did. So then, as I said in my sermon this morning, I was invited to another little Episcopal church on the other side of town, and the rector was from Alabama, and he answered all my questions. I was confirmed, and I went forward as I began doing this work. In 2007, I moved to I moved to Austin. I wound up being on staff at that church for 10 years. I moved to Austin. I went back to school, got a degree in religious studies. I was headed to Harvard Divinity. I got a phone call from Bishop Claude Payne for me to become the part-time director of a new ministry that had been created for leadership group for young clergy, invitation only. It had been founded at the National Cathedral in Washington, and they needed a new director for this emerging initiative called Gathering of Leaders. So they hired me part-time, low pay, no benefits. And I said yes to Bishop Payne because it was way back in 1995. It was Bishop Payne that told everybody in the Diocese of Texas at a big gathering to go home and invite someone to church. That's how I wound up at the Episcopal Church, because I got invited. So when I started working for Gathering of Leaders, we partnered with the seminary at Southwest, and they gave me an office, a beautiful office. And so I moved there in 2010. And that's when your new rector started seminary, right, TJ? 2010. And so then in the next month, or the next year, actually, Andy Doyle, the new bishop of Texas, asked me to take what I had created back when I was working at that church and develop it. And that's when I started developing it. And in 2013, I took it outside of Texas to Frank Allen's church in Wayne, Pennsylvania. And then it started growing. In early 2015, we decided to have our first national summit. And we had about, 350, 400 people there that began registering. But before that, I asked Bishop Doyle, I said, we need a good preacher for this first summit. And he says, Michael Curry's a pretty good preacher. And so I called the Diocese of North Carolina, and we got Bishop Curry to preach at that very first, that's him preaching in April of 2015 at Camp Allen. Now, when he was elected presiding bishop that summer in Salt Lake City, he came looking for me, and I have a photo of this picture of him tapping me on the shoulder, and he says, because I was a deputy for Texas, and he says, Mary, I want to invite you to give a keynote address on Invite, Welcome, Connect at our 200th annual convention for North Carolina, and it's this fall. He said, now I'm not going to be there, because he was going to be in New York. So I went that fall to North Carolina and gave the first keynote, really big keynote address for Invite, Welcome, Connect. The next year we had it again at Camp Allen. It was in 2016, and I invited Patrick Gahan to preach. And so then in 2017, I was invited to the convocation, the Episcopal convocation, the Convocation for Episcopal Churches in Europe in May of 2017. And when I went there, it was in Munich, and Bishop Curry happened to be in Rome at the same time, so he shot this little promo video for me.
Hello. Hello to all my friends, brothers, and sisters of the Convocation of Episcopal Churches in Europe. Your bishop, my dear friend, tells me that you're about to embark on Invite, Welcome, Connect, a program and effort developed by Mary Parmer of Texas to help us as Episcopalians to really engage the deep work of evangelism, which really comes down to inviting someone, to welcoming them, and helping them to grow as a part of the community of faith. I participated in this program as the Bishop of North Carolina, and we in our diocese were very much involved, and I believe are still growing in that involvement. It's a wonderful program, but it's more than just simply a program. It helps to inculcate a way of life that actually reflects the way of welcome of Jesus of Nazareth, the Jesus who said, "Come unto me, all ye who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." So Invite, Welcome, Connect is something we as Episcopalians can do. It's a way of evangelism that meets with who we are, that doesn't have us trying to be somebody we aren't, but actually calls us to be exactly who we are in Jesus Christ, and to invite and welcome and connect others to that life-giving reality. God bless you. God keep you. And let's keep this Jesus movement going.
So that fall, I moved the ministry at the invitation of Neil Alexander. Neil was the dean of the School of Theology at Sewanee, and I moved the ministry that fall to Sewanee. And Neil wrote this as some of the talking about this work. He says, "I don't think of Invite, Welcome, Connect as a program. I think of it as a call. It is a clarion call to the church to make sure others come to know who we know, Jesus, and what we have, abundant life." And then in March of 2018, I was invited by the Episcopal Church, National Episcopal Church, and Forward Movement to come be the keynote at their Evangelism Matters conference. On your website, I was telling TJ yesterday, it was here. And so in March of 2018, were any of y'all in the room by chance? A couple of you. It was standing room only out there. Of course, Bishop Curry was going to be the preacher, right? And I can remember us being in that little clergy room so I told Scott Gunn with Forward Movement that I would come if he would let me bring two of my advisory members. And so I brought Chris Harris, who at the time was at the cathedral in San Diego, a priest, and I brought Hillary Raining, who at the time was assistant rector at St. David's in Wayne, Pennsylvania. Chris has gone on now, and he is and so this is 2018. Chris is now the assistant rector at Christ Church Cranbrook, Michigan, and then Hillary just went as rector to St. Albans in Washington, D.C. So when I realized that this was on your website, and I realized that it's under the history, I got up at 5 o'clock yesterday morning in my hotel room and listened to because it's on YouTube still. Everything lives on the internet, right? And I just Googled it, and I listened to this. So I sent it to a couple of people on my board last night, and I said, there I am with the boot, because I had broken my ankle. And I remember I was headed off to the Diocese of Upper South Carolina. So I told them I can fly in, and I flew in at nighttime. They put me in a hotel near the airport. I came into this church. Betsy Bell was here. I remember her distinctly because I knew her. And I did the keynote address, and then I flew out because I had to fly to South Carolina, y'all. Anyway, so that's why, I'm walking around the church. I don't think I even walked in Tucker Hall when I was here. And when they showed me the chapel on the side this morning, I never even saw that. Anyway, so I have been here before, one time. All right, it's 10:30, I gotta move on. So in that summer at General Convention, my book came out. So poor Jason's over here having to film me. Sorry, Jason. My book came out, Bishop Curry wrote the foreword to it, and I was so grateful. And 29 other people wrote sidebars in the book. So jumping ahead, this past fall, Forward Movement asked me if they could do a 5th printing of the book. Not a 5th edition, but a 5th printing. And in this 5th printing, they let me tell the story of how we've moved Invite, Welcome, Connect into 501c3. 2013, we had a summit at Sewanee. Bishop Wright was the preacher. 2019, Atlanta. 2019, Carly Hughes is the new Bishop of Newark. 2020, Kevin Brown, the Bishop of Delaware, was supposed to preach, but COVID happened. And I'm going to jump forward, COVID. I'm going to go way on jump forward. And so we have moved this ministry now into a 501c3 because we had to wound up leaving Sewanee because of COVID, blah, 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 blah. And now I live back in Natchez, Mississippi, and I live in this old historical home that's literally attached to Trinity Episcopal Church. So I walk out my back door and I go to Sunday school and church now. A beautiful old historic home. Okay, we have Invite, Welcome, Connect on demand now. Vision statement is to change the culture, to move from maintenance to mission. These are the core values: to be prayerful, intentional, relational, and accountable. And I say, you know, this is really important. God is in the details. And this is actually a picture of your garden that I haven't even had the time to go walk in your garden, but I might have to do that before we go to lunch today, TJ. So Sam Portero says, inattention to the little things leads to the gradual loss of the larger ones. There's been lots of challenges, and I won't even, you know what, y'all can read the book and hear about the challenges. How about that? So I was in the Diocese of Lexington, and we were talking about, you know, what people, assumptions, and listen to what this gentleman said.
You ready? Recently, a retired bishop recently told us a story about the time he was preaching on evangelism at his cathedral, and after the service, an older lady came by and said, "Bishop, I don't understand all this of preaching on evangelism. If the Lord had wanted anyone to be an Episcopalian, they already would be one."
Right. So invite is, you know, it's about inviting people not just into a relationship with you, but others in your congregation. So here's a little video that I've been using for years. It's called Goulash. So listen to this, what this guy has to say.
Inside in a minute, I'm going to say hey to Joe. Hey, Joe.
Hey, Mike.
Flower beds are looking good, neighbor.
Yep. You guys just get back from church?
Yeah, just been at the church house.
I wonder why he never invites me to church. I mean, I'd go if he asked me to go. But this is the way it is. I'm out in my front yard when he comes home from church. It's always so awkward.
It's so awkward, and I'm so hungry. Ugh. I think my wife made goulash. I love goulash. Oh, maybe Joe would like some goulash for lunch. Hey, Joe.
Here comes the invitation to church.
Yeah? You want to come over for
Sure, I'd love to go to church with you.
What'd you just say?
What'd you just say?
No, what?
No, what'd you say? What'd you
what
say?
did you say?
You said something about God.
Goo.
Goo.
Goulash.
Goulash?
Goulash. It's a...
You're having goulash at your church?
No, at my house.
You're inviting me over for goulash.
Yeah.
At your goulash. Yeah, who doesn't like goulash? I'd like some goulash. Yeah, sign me up. Goulash.
I'll check and make sure we have enough.
I see you walking away.
Invite someone, don't do it like that. Anyway, life begins at the end of your comfort zone, and I talk about the deep truth of invite, which I talk about in the sermon, that it's just, we have to have courage. This is just a pen and ink I did years ago with that scripture. Welcome is the ministry of hospitality, and in this I give Joan Chittister in the Rule of Benedict. She says the rabbis wrote, "Hospitality is one form of worship. Come right in and disturb our perfect lives. You are the Christ for us today." And I talk about, let me go back. when I talk about welcome, I tell a story, and then I'm going to show you this video, which can be divisive in some people's minds because it's a company that has been divisive over the years, but it gets the point across that when people are coming into our churches, we don't know what's going on in their lives. And often we don't know what's going on in the lives of the people sitting beside us. So I want you to look at this video with that in mind. So every life has a story, if we bother to read it. 15 years ago, on September 11th, my grandson Ike was born up in southern New Jersey. My son and daughter-in-law met each other down in southeast Texas. They were both working for DuPont. Lee grew up in southern New Jersey and went to Drexel University, got a degree in chemical engineering, and immediately went with DuPont. She was a horsewoman. When I first got into that part of New Jersey, I didn't know New Jersey had horse farms. So she grew up, her parents bought her first horse after she took riding lessons when she was 6. So they bought her a horse when she was 8. And it was an Arabian, and she started riding. She decided to become a vegetarian in that moment and stayed a vegetarian. And so rode dressage all through college, and if you know what that is, it's difficult. Anyway, so when Ike was born, they knew something was wrong with him immediately. He couldn't suck or swallow. So they got him over to the DuPont Hospital for Children, where they determined that he had a rare neurological disorder called Mobius syndrome. It affects the 5th and 6th cranial nerves. He had no facial affect, couldn't suck or swallow, smaller arm and hand, and club feet. So they put a feeding tube in Ike and sent him home, and I was up there staying with Abby, the 2-year-old. My son called me on the way home from the hospital. He says, "Mom, find us a church." They lived in this tiny, tiny township. I got on the internet, this 15 years ago. There was one little church that had a website. It was a Presbyterian church. So this October morning, we go out. This is before we go into the church. And I took a picture of them. And Jason is holding that big old fat Bible that my Southern Baptist father sent for David child after him, and a bag that you see that has all the bells and whistles of a child with feeding tube. We go into church that day, we go to worship, we leave. No one bothered to even ask us our name. No one made any attempt to find out who we were, and I was horrified. So I flew back to Texas. With the next week, they had him in the doctor's office, and he stopped breathing again. And they put him back in the NICU and determined that he had something called trachea and bronchiomalacia, where his airways would collapse like a wet noodle. So they put him on a ventilator and sent us home with round-the-clock medical care for the next 2 years. So Jason gave up his job. Lee kept working for DuPont. Through the years, this was while they had moved to West Virginia, the DuPont plant, when I was at Sewanee. So they came up to hear me preach, and that's the little icon on the right, listening to me. And then they wound up moving to Alabama, near Mobile. Lee found a plastic surgeon who was doing experimental surgery out in Beverly Hills. And this has never been done before, so I've got to research that. He may be in the medical books at this point. So she took Ike out there twice, and I think he's about maybe in the 4th grade here. And she took him twice to the surgeon, and for them to take the nerves out of his leg to put in his cheek so that he could have a smile. And he had 2 different surgeries. And this is the little big elementary school there in Citronelle. You know, they did a whole teaching on what Mobius is all about. This is last year, the picture on the right. He's got a smile now, he wears glasses. So my family lets me tell the story, and I tell this story because my family needed community, y'all. My family needed community. And what I say about this is when people walk in the doors of our churches, the Holy Spirit brings them. And we have no idea what's going on in someone's life. And we sure don't want to jump on them and, like we're selling them a used car or something. But we don't want to let people walk out the doors of our churches without being seen and acknowledged. The deep truth of welcome is seeing the other. Connect is belonging. It's about giving meaning to membership. It's discovering the gifts. People are coming in our churches. They may be asking these questions. Where do I fit in? St. Paul's is a big church. So people are coming here. Can I make friends in this church? Is there room for me relationally? Does this church even need me? Can I find a place to belong and serve? Am I safe here? I talk in my sermon this morning about this loneliness epidemic, and this is the Surgeon General last year did this research, and it's all documented about the loneliness epidemic and how we have physical consequences, and how and I should put that up because one of the recommendations from the Surgeon General is to find a faith community. Find a place where you can connect and belong. The deep truth of connect, then, is a sacred act of listening. So, that's the overview. And I have, a whole lot more I could show you. But I want to open the floor for any questions that you might have. I have, now I'm going to be real quiet, introverted Episcopalians. You can stop filming me now, Jason. Thank you. Poor Jason, I said, how did you wind up with this? What do you do for a living? He said, I'm an attorney. I went, what kind of attorney? He said, bankruptcy. I said, well, I don't need you today. Thank God. But, yesterday, I had a captive audience for 3 hours. And I have to tell you that I texted one of my board members when I got back to the hotel last night, because I knew she was still up, to send her a picture of Kirsten. Do y'all know who Kirsten is? Raise your hand, Kirsten. Because when she walked up to me yesterday and told me that the church had bought $200 or whatever it was for the demand videos, and that she had gone through the whole demand videos, Invite Will Connect, and that she even got a certificate for it. I took a picture of you, sent it to my board member, because I literally have not watched those videos myself. Because through this whole process over the last year, when we became a 501c3 last year, and I prayed about it a lot. I told Patricia this last night. I woke up on Thanksgiving morning in 2022, which is almost 3 years, and it's like God has given me another book to write, and I need to write another book. And I've got a working title now, and it's going to be Bearing Witness to the Holy. And it's going to be a deeply personal book, because there's a whole lot with Invite, Welcome, Connect, because I've taken this work now to some 80 dioceses and all around the country. And it's time for me to hand it off so that it'll be sustainable, that it'll become sustainable. And so the only way to do that is to let the board, I even let them decide who the new director is, And so, anyway, Kirsten is going to take those videos now and go forward with it here at St. Paul's. I'm so grateful to you. Yes?
Thank you for being with us here this weekend. I wonder what regional and generational differences you notice among Episcopalians today.
What's your question?
What regional and generational differences you notice among Episcopalians?
Right. I don't talk about that a whole lot in the book. That's an interesting question. What's your name?
William.
So William, when I first did a workshop at St. David's in Wayne, Pennsylvania, that was my first time to take it out of Texas. And here I am, the Southerner, and literally, because I journaled, and I wrote in my journal, are they going to even hear me? Are they going to listen to a Southerner? Are they going to even, what is it going to be like? But they were so welcoming and engaging, and then I started taking it and there was a time when I was traveling right before COVID, I literally, and I'll answer your question, but I went for the Diocese of California and I did a workshop at Grace Cathedral, down in their auditorium underneath the nave, just like this. And I flew, and I preached that Sunday morning at St. James, and then I flew that Sunday afternoon and did a red-eye all the way to New York City, because on Monday night, I did a workshop for the vestry at Grace Church in Lower Manhattan. So when I tell you that I have just gone, and I've been in a lot of contexts, I wrote the book so that little bitty tiny churches and large churches, they take what works for them. But regionally, I kind of talk about that when I did the workshop, because I have all these ideas that sometimes, when you take it, like a welcome gift, and I shared yesterday all the different kind of welcome gifts all over the country that some people, when a new, a person comes for the very first time. So regionally, there are that sort of things, name tags, whatever, the liturgy is pretty much always the same, but the regional stuff like Bishop Curry, I write about this in the book, and he talks about this, he talks about how Episcopalians are sort of an introverted lot. And so I knew early on that I had to come at this not with a pushy sort of Baptist, because trust me, all my family are still Baptist, and they're all members of First Baptist Church Natchez, and everybody knows my family in Natchez. So for me to move home, and I'm the only one, one of my sisters didn't speak to me for 2 years because I left the family of the Baptist. So it's taken them a while just to get, So there are regional differences, but what I say about that, I had a whole talk about that actually. What I say about that is at the bottom of it all, we're all human, right? And we all have a need to be seen, to be affirmed, to be loved. What I try to do and I tried to do this yesterday, is we can be gracious with our welcome, our invitation. We don't have to be pushy with people. I hope that kind of answers your question. Yes?
Could you tell us a little bit more as parishioners how we can engage with the connect piece? If we feel like we've invited and we've welcomed, what can we do next?
That person back there is going to be the one that's going to help you do that. Because what in the Connect Essential, and I don't know if you have any extra of the booklets we did yesterday. So in that booklet, I give the ideas for what to do with Connect, and some of the ideas are to find a way that people can share their faith stories. What's your name?
Katie.
Katie. So sharing the story, your story is really critical. And so what I said and what I say ad nauseum is that Invite, Welcome, Connect is not just for the newcomers, it's for everybody sitting in the pews. Because there are people sitting in the pews here at St. Paul's that I'm sure are members here, long-term members. They want to be buried here, they want the daughter married here, but maybe they never got engaged in ministry here. I call them pew potatoes. The point is, and I told them this yesterday, I told TJ and Patricia and Gabriel, it may be our fault that they never got engaged in ministry. We may have people sitting in our pews because we've never taken the time to hear their story. So I give 3 little questions in that material. To find a way to sit around, and you can do it in any of the groups. These are the questions. Where were you born? Were you raised in a church, a religion or a church tradition? If it's something different from Episcopalian, what brought you to the Episcopal Church? And what brought you here today? And so we started using those simple questions when I started working at St. Stephen's way back in 1997. And the church had a big split. So we would make a list of all the new people. We would sit around the table, we'd have cookies and lemonade on a Sunday afternoon. And I would share my story. Patrick would share his story. He grew up in Birmingham, alcoholic father, Episcopalian, alcoholic father, abandoned the family. They were poor. When Patrick, it was in the 9th grade, the Episcopal Church in Birmingham sent him and his little brother off to Sewanee, to St. Andrew's boarding school for boys only at the time. So he went to 4 years of boarding school in an Episcopal boarding school. And that's where he became, got the call to become a priest. So he never reconciled with his alcoholic father. So then I shared my story, and then we asked each person just to tell that story. Where are you from? So I would take notes. So I guess for you, beginning this is just even on your own. If somebody that you've known here, but you have no idea where they were born or where they came from, or and just kind of start making those connections that way. Kirsten?
A great opportunity to do that. Coming up in October to mid-November, the Guess Who's Coming to Top Us opportunities. So make sure you look through that in your, it's in your bulletin.
In the bulletin, yeah. So you're going to be doing that. Yes. And your name is Lois. Hey, Lois.
Short story, I'm raised Presbyterian, married first time to my late husband who was a UCC minister. Very different tradition than the Episcopal Church. Hired here, met this gentleman. Now I am Lois Bell, the handbell choir director, which is
Lois Bell, the handbell choir. So Lois, you brought her in.
I did. I have to.
Not really.
She chased me.
But
say
anyway, what happens when you meet people that do not respond to that? I mean, that they feel like you're being intrusive. Like where you?
Well, I would never ask those questions. And then last night, now give me a break, Patricia.
I know that.
I have been talking to that young Oliver for a long time. We had talked about all kinds of. We had talked. I had established a relationship with him before I said, "Do you happen to go to a church around here anywhere?" No, I told him first what I was. I told him about this anyway. Those questions that I'm talking about, I wouldn't say to just go walk up to, a newcomer and ask them. That has to be done in a safe setting. And so I think that though that whole part of Connect about helping people, helping us have the comfort, have the courage, just to talk about our faith. And in the book, y'all, and I realized this yesterday when the young man came up from Cleveland Clinic. In the book, I literally talk about a doctor from the Cleveland Clinic, and he was famous for valves, right? And he had valve surgery. So in the book, I talk about how can you share your faith comfortably in different ways, creative ways. And he told me that he calls them faith flags. So when he is talking to a family, and he has families from all over the world come, and he's going to do surgery on a family member. If he sees anything or hears anything in his conversations with the family that they have a faith, and it could be any faith, whether it's Muslim or Christian or Hindu or whatever, if he gets that kind of flag, he said what he does, right before surgery, he brings in his team and the family, and he offers a prayer himself going forward in surgery. So that's the way he shares his faith. So the creativity is my favorite chapter in my book, my favorite chapter. And I talk about how we can be creative with ways that we share our faith. Anyone else?
I've got a comment.
A comment?
Yeah, my name's Lloyd. I'm father-in-law of Betsy.
You're Betsy's father-in-law.
Betsy, I am. Claim to fame. Anyway,
Yeah, she sent me a text.
I bet she did. Lois and I did, in fact, invite somebody here. Remember Erica, who was my dance partner. We were also doing ballroom dancing. And you dance with a pro when you do that. And she was my dance partner. We invited her to church here, and she came. She actually came twice, I think. Second time with her son and husband. And she was African American. So, and she hadn't gone to church in years because she was like almost banned because she had gotten pregnant in college and her congregation sort of turned on her. So she had that background feeling. But she came here and it was all nice. But what she said when it was over, she said, "Is it over?" Because she was used to going to black
Long
churches
services.
where they're like 3 hours long and a lot of music and
But at
all
least you
that.
had lift every voice and sing out there.
Well, I don't know if they were using that.
Oh, but I love it. I love that songbook.
But the point being that it's, to a lot of Protestants, I think, because we are technically Protestant, but we're really Anglo-Catholic.
Right.
The liturgy, you said how much you like the liturgy from a Southern Baptist, so I found striking that you said that, because I think that so many Protestants come into an Episcopal church as Catholic. With all the ritual and the vestments, it's Catholic.
Yeah.
And some don't really, the Catholics relate to it very well,
Right.
but some Protestants don't.
Right. But
So
in
what's your reaction to that?
Well, in the book, what I talk about is I didn't know what liturgy was, of course. All I knew, I didn't know to call it that. All I knew was I love the reverence. I love the being able to kneel. I love, just the sense of reverence that we had. I want to say this before we close too. I was telling Anna this morning, she was sitting beside me, how blessed y'all are. It has been a long, 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 long time that I have been at a church that's got this many kids. No, I'm not kidding you. It is huge. So y'all are hugely blessed. All right, I gotta preach in 12 minutes. So thank y'all.
First of all, Mary, thank you so much for all you've shared, and especially for sharing from your heart, which really touches to the core of the issue. I want to say that in terms of all the information that Mary has shared will be available on our website, or you can talk to Kirsten or to myself. She has a book, as she said. She shared a workbook with us yesterday, which has a lot of practical ideas in it. And I also want to remind you that our theme this year at St. Paul's is belonging, which is all about this. So if you missed our forum last year, which gave an overview of what we're going to be doing this year, this relates to what Mary said. And also, I truly did summarize the story clearly of last night when she was talking to the waiter. She clearly has the gift of gab and had that guy laughing, and it was not as abrupt as I described it. It was really beautiful. I was really enjoying modeling it. I was her modeling it. So thank you again, and thank you all for coming, and I hope you'll look for more information on our website.
Thank you all.